Choir, I'm going to invite you to come down and share a seat with your brothers and sisters this morning so that we will all be in one place, if you don't mind. I hope that over these last several days you have had an opportunity to share your thanks unto God for His gifts. I hope that you were able to share this time with family and with friends and folks close to you as we move from this season of giving thanks into this season of Advent and waiting into Christmas. Advent is a season of waiting, a season of hopeful anticipation, a season of reflection and preparation, or so I've been told. Advent is a season when we speak of hope and joy, peace and love. Since 1978, I have led 4 very different congregations through this Advent season of waiting. We have presented poinsettias and hung the greens. We have lit candles and sung carols and gathered for communion by candlelight on Christmas Eve. But the preparation for Advent this year has been very different for me. I have come to this Advent season experiencing in my own soul a certain agitation and frustration, and I found myself entertaining forbidden questions like these. For what and for whom are we waiting? Who is waiting for whom to do what? I confess to you this morning, having grown up in the Bible Belt in South Carolina, about knowing more about how this season of waiting relates to Santa Claus than how it relates to God. My earliest memories of Advent have nothing to do, my earliest memories of Christmas joy have nothing to do with Advent, nor the celebration of the birth of Jesus, which comes in a distant 4th place, falling behind Santa Claus coming to town, behind the encouragement of relatives and friends to be good little boys and girls, and behind the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. In fact, the church that I grew up in had only 3 Christmas traditions. The first was the annual Christmas cantata presented by the Sanctuary Choir. The second occurred at the conclusion of that cantata when all of us went forward to lay our Lottie Moon Christmas offering for foreign missions on a manger filled with straw. And the third tradition was at the end of that service when all the boys and girls went to the fellowship hall where we received a long, thin bag with 2 oranges, 2 apples, a tangerine, 3 or 4 walnuts, a few pecans, and a candy cane. All 3 of these Christmas traditions occurred on the Sunday before Christmas every single year, come rain or sleet, snow or ice, hail or high water. They came and they went. My real experience of waiting and hopefulness and joy revolved around the arrival of the Sears and Roebuck Christmas catalog sometime in November. Wandering through the J.C.'s Christmas tree lot, searching diligently for that one tree that would look perfect in our living room. Decorating that live tree with colored lights and ornaments and icicles. Covering the front door with some type of colored aluminum foil, a wreath, and pine boughs tacked around the edges. I spent a lot of time worrying about being a good little boy because I knew Santa was making a list and checking it twice, finding out who had been naughty and nice. And I was barely able to sleep on Christmas Eve in anticipation of Santa's visit, wondering if by some miracle of Christmas I would receive those 3 things my mom and dad allowed me to circle in the Sears and Roebuck Christmas catalog. There was absolutely no joy like the joy that filled the Broom household on Christmas morning. And when I became a father, I continued all of these Christmas traditions revolving around Santa Claus with a little bit of Advent thrown in on the side. You see, one celebration of Christmas was rather easy to observe, for we knew whom we were waiting for, Santa Claus. And we knew what we were waiting for, the surprise of finding those deeply desired gifts under the Christmas tree, wrapped in beautiful paper on Christmas morning. Now, the Advent season of waiting may be similar, but it is quite different. We do make preparations. I am grateful to you this morning for joining in the spirit of this worship service as we prepared this sanctuary for this season. We present poinsettias, we hang greens, we light candles. We drag the Advent log into the sanctuary with its 3 purple candles and 1 pink candle with a Christ candle in the center. We hang the banners with the words of this season of waiting: faith, hope, love, peace, and joy. Yet I wonder this morning, does anyone really know what we are waiting for, or for whom we are waiting? Does anyone know what we are waiting for and for whom we are waiting? And a more perplexing question for me this Advent season is this one: who is waiting for what? Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book, doesn't it? Now, I am quite confident that the passage you heard from Isaiah this morning has never been chosen for the first Sunday of Advent. There are many passages from Isaiah that you would find comforting this morning on the first Sunday of Advent. From chapter 7 of Isaiah, we could read, "Hear then, O house of David, it is too little for you to weary mortals, that you weary my God also. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the virgin is with child and shall bear a son and shall call him Immanuel." Or from Isaiah chapter 9, "The people who have walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in the land of deep darkness, on them the light has shined." You have multiplied the nation, you have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as people exult when dividing the plunder. For the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For all the boots of the tramping warriors and all the garments rolled in blood shall be burned for fuel for the fire. For a child has been born for us, a son is given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. You know those words from Isaiah. For a time such as this. And the words from chapter 11. A shoot shall come from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. The righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. The wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them. You know all of those words from the Advent season. But of all of the passages chosen from Isaiah for this year, this time of year, this season, I am convinced no one has ever read. Shout out! Don't hold back. Make your voice sound like a trumpet. Announce to the people their rebellion. Identify and clarify their sins for them. Yes, perhaps only old John the Baptist would pull out Isaiah 58 for one of his sermons on repentance. You see, Isaiah 58 is an indictment. Is an indictment of a people who no longer take the living God seriously. Is an indictment of a people who have made their living faith a little game of self-righteousness and exclusion, while ignoring mercy and compassion. It is an indictment of a people who with their lips and their voices claim to be seeking to please God, but their thoughts and their actions, their investments and their ambitions tell another story. It is an indictment of a people who masquerade as a people whose hearts truly belong to God, but consider obedience to God an unnecessary and trivial thing. This is an indictment of a people who seek to draw near unto God in worship, who fast and who pray, and then have the gall to accuse God of not paying them enough attention, who accuse God of not matching their faithfulness with His faithfulness, who fought God for refusing to answer their prayers offered in a spirit of selfishness. This is an indictment of a people who claim faith in God and obedience to God, and yet are self-centered, self-absorbed, self-indulgent, indifferent to the needs of their neighbor, ignoring injustice, hold on to bitterness and resentment, who quarrel and fight as if it were a sport in the name of God. You see, through this prophet of Isaiah, God is speaking to a people whose minds were filled with images of a light shining in the darkness, of mountains being brought low and valleys being lifted up, and a highway miraculously appearing in the wilderness, leading them from captivity and Babylon home to Zion, to Jerusalem, where they would rebuild their holy city and their temple, and they would be God's blessing to all the world. But when they arrived home, back to the promised land, back to Jerusalem, things were not quite so rosy. Somehow, the walls of Jerusalem did not magically withdraw from the ruins and stack themselves on top of one another to protect the new citizens of the holy city. The temple and rebuilding the temple was nothing but a dream in their hearts. God's promise to them to do something new now appeared like a false promise. From their perspective, whatever God was doing, He wasn't doing it fast enough. You see, being God's people in this strange new world was certainly more than they had bargained for. They were learning. Being light is hard. You just try it. Getting a lion and a lamb to lie down side by side. You just try to get nations to beat their swords into plowshares and see how it goes for you. Yes, it sounds good in church on Sunday morning, but on Monday morning it sounds naive and irresponsible. And so, this people of God back in the promised land masqueraded as God's people, forgetting what God truly desired of them. They indulged themselves in empty religious slogans about loving God and neighbor and self, about serving the poor and neglected, about honoring the commandments of God. But that's not what God wanted. God desired a people who were committed to what He wanted in His world. God needed people who would forget about themselves, roll up their sleeves to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to liberate the oppressed, and to shatter every instrument of oppression. God needed people who would take His compassionate justice seriously. God needed people who would share the bread of their table with the hungry in their homes, not in some soup kitchen. God needed a people who would bring the homeless poor into their houses and not into some shelter on the edge of town. God needed a people who would cover the nakedness of people with their own clothing. God needed a people who would assume the responsibility of taking care of their own relatives and not throwing them upon the charity of others. This prophet of Isaiah is saying to the people who came to church, all dressed up in their Sunday's best, he was saying to them, if you want God to hear you, if you want God to be pleased with you, if you truly want to bring hope and peace, love and joy to the world, if you truly want to be received as messengers of mercy and compassion, if you sincerely want God to help you and to be with you, then it's time for you to do the things God dreams for His world. And if you begin to do those things, whenever you call upon His name, God will say, here I am. But until then, you are just wandering around in the deserts of your own souls. Now this morning, I have a hunch. I have a hunch that we have turned Advent upside down. You see, God has already sent the light into the world. A light that darkness has no power to overwhelm. God has come to be like us in every way. God has completed the work of salvation. God has saved His people from their sins. He has unleashed the power of redemption, and God has empowered love to vanquish fear, hatred, evil, and death. See, I have a hunch that it is God who is waiting for us this Advent. God is waiting for us. And what is God waiting for? He's waiting for us to rise to the challenge of loving Him as Jesus loved Him in obedience. He is waiting for us to begin to live our day-to-day lives as if we were indeed beloved sons and daughters of God Himself, in a world that is suspicious of any idea of a living God. What is God waiting for? He's waiting for us to get our hands dirty and our heads cracked doing the hard work of justice. For there is no peace without justice. God is waiting for us to embrace divine realities. Light overcomes darkness. Good ultimately subdues evil. Love ensures that there's life. God is waiting for us to share our bread, our clothing, our homes, our privileges. For there can be no peace where God's children are hungry and naked and cold, where there's no respect for God's children in the hearts of God's people. God is waiting for us to abandon our fear and to live courageously in our world. God is waiting for us to find our voices so we may declare with confidence that love heals. Wherever love ceases to be a noun and becomes a verb, for it is love that inspires acts of mercy and compassion. God is waiting for us to prove that hope indeed empowers the weak, that hope lifts up the downtrodden, that hope sings throughout the darkest night. God is waiting for us to declare that peace cannot be assumed when there is no peace in the human heart, where the fires of suspicion and fear are tended and violence lurks. Peace. Peace begins in the human heart through sacrifice inspired by love. God is waiting for us to embody joy, a joy that is real, a joy that is not elusive or momentary, a joy that inspires a whole community to lift up their voices toward heaven in song. A joy that invites feet to dance across God's good earth. And a joy that offers prayers of praise for the blessings shared. God's joy is a contagious joy, spreading like wildfire when people come together, recognizing that everyone belongs to one family, God's family. When everyone finally recognizes that God does not prefer one child over another, and any claims that He does are false. For the God revealed in Jesus the Christ shows no partiality. I am convinced that we all know what to expect on Christmas morning when Santa's gifts are discovered under the Christmas tree. I am also convinced that it's very hard for many of us who come to church on Christmas Eve to receive candlelight communion to know what we are waiting for. We don't know for what or for whom we are waiting. This is why I am willing to declare to you this morning on this first Sunday of Advent that it is God who is waiting for us. It is God who is waiting for us to live as His beloved children in the world, seeking first God's kingdom and God's righteousness. God is waiting for us this Advent. God is waiting for us to finally surrender ourselves to do His bidding in the world. God waits for us so that His will may be done on this earth through us. And while God is waiting, the world waits too. Who is waiting this Advent season? God. What is He waiting?